Hi everyone, this is Mariah and I am doing my student presentation on Sarah Coakley. She was born in 1951. She is also the Norris Holz Professor of Divinity at the University of Cambridge and the Pastoral Fellow of Murray Edwards College of Cambridge. So before I begin discussing Sarah Coakley's stance on systematic theology, I want to provide a little bit of background that I found out about her that I found truly interesting. She received her first degree in theology at Cambridge. She continued her graduate work at Harvard, returned to Cambridge to complete her doctoral work on the Christology of Ernst Troeltsch. I can't say the last name right, so I'm sorry about that. So those are some key points of her educational background. She is an Anglican systematic theologian and philosopher of religion. I didn't want to provide too much biography. I really wanted to dig deep into her written works, her her theologies, and I can understand from reading and gathering all this information for this presentation why she would be an important figure in contribution in theology. I'm going to be focusing on the reading that I found, which is God, Sexuality, and the Self, an essay on the Trinity. I provided a photo of what the work looks like on the right-hand side. And from my research, I found out that this is first of the 4 volumes that she is intended to write. And in this literature, she digs deep into issues such as sexuality, gender, race, because she feels that the institutional Christianity is in need of it. She feels that, I would say, hot topic issues are so easily brushed aside and no one wants to deconstruct scripture and prayer, meditation about those certain topics. So I applaud her for that because she does challenge reflections and ideas that are not normally brought into the systematic theology realm. And I would say from my reading, I gather that she really focuses on engaged contemplation of God. And from my gatherings, I'm going to state the best that I can about what I believe she means by this. So this engaged contemplation of God is where humanity hands over our control and we let God be God. And by handing over this control that we have as humans and this contemplation we have of God, that will allow us to truly connect and understand God and be one with God. And this is mostly pertaining to prayer and meditation. So as I continue to read, I noticed 3 pivotal arguments that she found that she wanted to argue against, more or less say. So the first one is the argument that this systematic theology will demonstrate that humans believe that they can make God be controlled by human thinking. The second one is more so a liberation theology, where it says that systematic theology is done by people who refuse to look at those who are marginalized and need liberation. And the third argument is the feminist perspective against systematic theology, where it says that systematic theology excludes the voice of women, basically that they are masculist. So Sarah Coakley takes on those arguments, and in this book, and I just believe in her systematic theology in general, argues against those in these 3 points. First, she states that through this contemplation and allowance of God, that God is then able to become one with us and interrupt our thoughts and what we are believing. And because of that, we are not controlling God because we're giving away that temptation. We're giving away all of our control that humanity usually wants. We want control. So by giving God everything and allowing Him to interrupt our lives, it kind of annihilates the first point. Second point is that over time, when we allow God to interrupt our thoughts of what we think, what we believe, and change our hearts, we hear the voices of the marginalized that in the past before we allowed God to come into our life and come into our hearts and in our prayers that we would not focus on, that we would not see. So now that we have the systematic theology, now that we are taking in God, letting Him do His works in our hearts, thus we are looking at those that need help. We're looking at those who need the good news. And then the third point is she's very uncomfortable with the feminist critique, I would say. And she states that in her works that because God allows interruptions or because we allow God to interrupt our prayer life, our hearts, and our minds, thus He will direct us to unpack reasons behind certain scripture, reasons behind certain subjects that are not easy to understand at first. So this argument that systematic theology is against women and emasculus, she kind of just voids that argument in general. She doesn't think that it's a valid argument to make. So throughout her work, Sarah Coakley, she gives different examples of different scripture that backs up that theory. But I wanted to also bring attention to something else that I found beautiful in her theology, which is bringing up the concept of theology total. And she took this from the Hanel School. I believe it was in France. I put a picture of that also on the bottom right hand side. It was a literary school that had this concept, and they tried to show justice in every level of society. And she takes that concept into her own theology and in her written works. So she believes that systematic theology cannot ignore gender, race, and sexuality, all those different issues that I stated in the beginning that a lot of people want to brush by. I also believe that it was beautiful in her work that she wrote that she believes that the arts need to be emphasized and reflected on as well, such as poetry, dance, art, literature, etc., that can help us understand life a little bit better and can demonstrate scripture and connect us with God. As I conclude my presentation, I wanted to give a brief reflection. I know I didn't get to say as much as I wanted to about Sarah Coakley because I did find her work intriguing. I want to still continue reading this book that I've been talking about, or this essay. And I want to share why I think that as students, or just in general, why Sarah Coakley is an important contribution to modern theology and systematic theology in general. I think that she has a lot to offer, and these are a few reasons why I do appreciate that she is proud of being a woman in this theology and discussing that and these issues need to be brought up. I also appreciate that she does not just side with any feminists, but that her critiques are structured. Another reason why I think that she's important to acknowledge and why we should all read some of her works is because all of her studies play a critical part of her arguments. So, anthropology and philosophy, you can tell, from philosophy of religion, that can be added in her spirituality studies, her science studies, all that plays a crucial element of her arguments. And then lastly, her understanding and structure of her theology, I really do appreciate. It's not jumbled together. It's very structured. She knows what she's talking about. And she knows that life matters are in a wider perspective, and she's not afraid to deconstruct and dig deeper into the text, I shall say. So this is the end of my presentation for Sarah Coakley. I hope you did enjoy it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Bye.